In international trade, goods and services are being exchanged beyond boundaries. Therefore, payment methods are different from the ones used in domestic market. For transaction within the country, the payment can be made by check, cash, demand draft, online transfers, etc. But in international trade, rules, regulations, business environment are different, and so are the currencies of exporters and importers' country. In this section, we'll try and understand how payment is being made in international trade. In case of advance payment, exporter will ship the goods only after the importer have paid the exporter. The time of payment in this case is before shipment, and the importer gets the goods only after payment. Since exporter gets payment even before shipping the goods, therefore, risk to the exporter is nil. However, importer is at high risk because he has to rely on exporter to ship goods as ordered. Open account or consignment export is opposite of advance payment, wherein the exporter delivers the goods even before the payment is made. In this case, importer makes the payment at a future date. Also, importer does not accept any negotiable instrument. Therefore, exporter does not have any evidence from the importer for commitment to pay at a future date. The importer pays after receiving the goods and after inspecting them. An open account is used in those cases where there is a trust between the exporter and importer. This payment method is used in e-commerce, wherein the exporter ships the goods first and receives the payment after the importer pays for the goods. So to summarize, time of payment in open account is at a future date. Importer receives the goods before making payment to the exporter. Exporter is at a very high risk as he has delivered the goods before payment and he does not have any evidence for commitment from the importer for making payment in future, as no negotiable instrument is used in this case. Risk for the exporter increases in case there is change in policy regulations in the importer's country, wherein government imposes restrictions on remittance of funds. Risk to the importer is minimum as he makes payment at a future date. In case of advance payment and open account, there is high amount of risk either for the exporter or importer. In case of advance payment, the risk for the importer is high, whereas in case of open account, exporter is at a high risk. In this payment method of documentary collection, wherein bill of exchange is used, risk is divided between both the exporter and importer. In documentary collection, bill of exchange, also known as draft, is used. Bill of exchange is an unconditional written order prepared by the exporter. When importer receives the bill of exchange, he is liable to pay specified amount to the exporter at time mentioned in the document. Bill of exchange is primarily of two types, side draft and usance draft. In case exporter presents a side draft, then the importer is liable to pay as soon as he receives the draft. Whereas in case of usance draft, certain credit period is given to the importer. In the picture, you can see that there is no credit period given in case of side draft, whereas in case of usance draft, importer is liable to pay after 2 months. Documentary collection is of two types depending upon which type of bill of exchange is being used. If side draft is used, then the payment method is known as document against payment or DP. In case of DP, shipping documents are given to the importer after he makes the payment. Whereas in case of document against acceptance, a usance draft is used. Importer receives shipping document only after he accepts the usance draft. Accepting the draft means that the importer gives the confirmation that the payment will be made within the credit period. To understand the mechanism of payment in case of documentary collection, we must know about various parties involved in the entire process. Apart from exporter and importer, banks are also involved in this process. There is Exporters Bank, also known as Collecting Bank, and importer's bank known as remitting bank. After shipping the goods, exporter gives shipping document and bill of exchange to the collecting bank or the exporter's bank. Collecting bank then forward all the documents to the importer's bank or the remitting bank for obtaining payment or acceptance from the importer. In the subsequent section, you will see that due to involvement of bank, risk is shared between both the exporter and importer. Now, to get more clarity, we will try and understand the process of realizing payment in case of documentary collection. First, let's see how payment is realized in case of document against payment. So the first step in this case is that the exporter gives all the shipping document along with bill of exchange to his bank, also known as collecting bank. Since currently we are discussing about document against payment, therefore site draft is used in this case. In the second step, collecting bank forwards all the documents received from the exporter to the remitting bank or the importer's bank. Remitting bank then informs the importer about receipt of documents from the exporter. After getting intimation from the remitting bank, importer makes payment to the remitting bank. In step 5, bank gives all the documents to the importer. It is important to note here that documents are handed over to the importer only after he makes the payment, which is why this payment method is also known as document against payment. After receiving the payment from the importer, the remitting bank remits the collecting bank or the exporter's bank as part of step 6. Finally, in step 7, exporter receives the payment from the collecting bank. So now the question is there any risk for the exporter or importer? And the answer is yes. Imagine the situation where the exporter has shipped the goods and all the shipping documents are with the remitting bank, and importer does not turn up to collect the document. So there is still risk for the exporter. Possible solutions for the exporter in this case can be to renegotiate with the importer, offer discount to the existing importer. If this does not work, then exporter can look for alternate importer for the products. The exporter or his representative might as well have to personally visit the importer's country to dispose of the goods through agents, etc. In such situations, exporter might face huge financial losses as actual payment is less than the anticipated amount. If no other options are there, then the exporter can arrange to bring back the goods. So what about the importer? Does he also have risk in this case? And the answer again is yes. Now put yourself in importer situation and imagine that you have made payment for the consignment and have taken the shipping documents from the remitting bank. Now, let us assume that the importer gets the goods 2 weeks after making the payment. So after 2 weeks, when the importer receives the good, he finds that the quality is not as per the terms and conditions of the agreement. What are the alternatives for him in this case, as payment has already been made? So to minimize risk, importer can either insist on quality certificate from the exporter during the negotiation phase or can explore options for partial payment at the time of receiving the document, while the remaining amount can be paid after receiving the goods. But again, this has to be agreed upon between the exporter and importer during the initial negotiation stage itself. The last option for the importer will be to resolve the dispute legally. So in case of document against payment, importer makes the payment on presentation of the site draft. Importer gets the goods only after payment. As discussed in the previous section, both exporter and importer have some risk. Okay, now let's move to another payment method under documentary collection, also known as document against acceptance. Payment is realized in case of document against acceptance in two phases. Phase 1 is related to acceptance of usance draft, wherein exporter sends shipping document and usance draft through the banks to the importer an importer accepts to make payment at a future date. And phase two is the process involved in collection of payment against acceptance given by the importer in phase one. Let's understand the process with the help of this diagram. As you can see in the figure, after shipping goods, exporter gives all the shipping documents along with the usance draft to the collecting bank for onward submission to the remitting bank. Then after receiving the documents, remitting bank informs the importer. As part of fourth step, importer accepts the usance draft, which means that the importer agrees to make payment at a future date. After receiving acceptance from the importer, remitting bank gives all the document to the importer. Remitting bank then forwards the acceptance given by the importer to the exporter through the collecting bank. So at the end of phase one, exporter has the importer's acceptance and importer has all the documents. Now let's see how the exporter is finally paid in case of document against acceptance. As you can see in the figure, exporter sends importer's acceptance or usance draft to the importer through the collecting and remitting bank. After receiving the usance draft, importer makes payment to the remitting bank, which is sent to the exporter through the collecting bank. If we talk about the risk for the exporter in case of DA, exporter in this case is at a higher risk as compared to importer, as he has shipped the goods for which importer will make payment at a future date. There can be instances of non-payment by the importer on maturity of the draft. In such cases, exporter can either opt for equalization or discounting of bill of exchange. In case of equalization of bill of exchange, importer's bank or remitting bank guarantees payment if the importer defaults in honoring a bill at maturity. The exporter can also opt for discounting of bill of exchange, wherein the exporter can sell the bill of exchange to a bank at a discounted rate. Exporter may also face risk in case the importer does not turn up to collect document. In such cases, exporter can resort to the same mechanism as was discussed in case of document against payment. DA is more risky for the exporter as he does not even have title of the goods. After giving acceptance, importer can take all the shipping document from the bank, therefore importer has title of the goods. To safeguard himself, exporter can obtain credit report of the importer. There are many organizations which provide credit report. Exporter can also take credit risk insurance from ECGC for mitigating risk in case of non-payment by the importer. So what about risk for the importer? Importer is at a comparatively less risk as he has already taken the goods for which payment will be made at a future date. Risk is there for the importer to the extent that he has to rely on exporter to ship goods as per the documents. So to summarize again, exporter receives the payment on maturity of draft. Importer receives the goods before payment. So exporter is at risk because he has to rely on the importer to make payment wherein there is negligible risk for the importer. Another payment method used in international trade is letter of credit. A letter of credit essentially is an undertaking given by the importer's bank on behalf of the importer to the exporter to pay for the goods and services provided that the exporter presents documents that comply with the terms and conditions of the letter of credit. Payment process in case of letter of credit involves two steps. In the first step, importer's bank issues the letter of credit, and in the second step, payment is made to the exporter against the letter of credit. Before going into more details, we must understand parties involved in letter of credit. In the simplest scenario, four parties are involved, that is, the applicant or the importer, beneficiary or the exporter, issuing bank, and the advising bank. Issuing bank is the importer's bank which opens the letter of credit. Issuing bank also take responsibility to make payment on receipt of document from supplier of goods. Advising bank or the exporter's bank advises the exporter about the letter of credit to the beneficiary. In addition, there can be confirming bank as well. Role of confirming bank is to guarantee payment in case issuing bank or the importer fails to make payment. Advising bank can also act as a confirming bank. So we will understand the procedure involved in issuing the letter of credit. As you can see in the diagram, first of all, both the parties, that is exporter and importer, agrees for a contract of sale, wherein payment will be made by letter of credit. Next, the importer or the applicant instructs his bank to open a letter of credit in favor of exporter or the beneficiary. After receiving instructions from the importer, issuing bank issues the letter of credit, which is sent to the advising bank. Advising bank then informs the beneficiary accordingly. Advising bank, as told earlier, can also act as a confirming bank. To realize payment in case of letter of credit, beneficiary or the exporter ships the goods as per the terms and conditions of letter of credit and then submits all the shipping documents to the advising bank for negotiation. Negotiation of document means that the bank purchases the bill and will reimburse the beneficiary if the documents are in order. So, if the exporter furnish all the documents as per the letter of credit, bank gives the payment to the exporter. Documents are then forwarded to the issuing bank. Issuing bank checks the document and makes payment to the advising or the confirming bank. Issuing bank then gives all the shipping documents to the importer against payment. Importer then uses these documents to take custody of the goods. In case of letter of credit, exporter gets the payment as soon as the shipment is made, and importer gets the good after he makes payment. It is important to note here that the payment is made only when all the documents are in order. Therefore, risk for exporter and importers is very less. In this table, one can compare risk for the exporter and importer in all the payment methods discussed so far. For an exporter, payment risk decreases as we move from open account to documentary collection to documentary credit and to advance payment. Whereas for an importer, payment risk increases if we move in the same order. This last table is again a comparison of all the payment methods in respect of time of payment, at what point of time the goods will be available to the importer, risk to the exporter and importer. Hope you have understood all the methods used in international trade. Thank you and keep tuned in for more such videos in the area of international business. Thank you.